Welcome, welcome, welcome to the inaugural show, CEO Unboxed, where we unveil powerful and personal stories of the most intriguing business leaders. I'm so excited to kick off uh, the show with an amazing leader, Arindam. He is a visionary CEO of CentSai. He has tremendous stories to share with us today, from his encounters with Mother Teresa to how he went on this very impressive journey of sharing his lessons from Wall Street to Main Street, and sharing how to achieve financial literacy for the masses. Um, Really, you're in for an amazing episode today, and I am excited to welcome Arindam to join me. Arindam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited. We had our pre-recording discussion, and there was just so much to unpack, and I can't wait to learn more and share more about your journey. And so, if we start, because it's CEO Unboxed, I have this little CEO Unboxed, so that's what we're going to be doing today. And
I love the name.
so yeah, and the first aspect of this is really going back in time, and going back to your childhood. Who did you dream to become, Arindam? What was your vision for the future?
Oh my goodness. I've dreamt quite a few things in my early childhood, teenage years. I think when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a truck driver because my family wasn't poor, but at the same time, I realized that there was always a scarcity of money in the family, and my parents prioritized on food and education and shelter and clothing, but we did not go on enough vacations as some of my classmates. So I thought, what a great idea if I actually became a truck driver. And I could literally, on someone else's dime, I would be able to drive around India, the entire country where I grew up in, and see the country. So I wanted to be a truck driver. And then that changed over time.
Amazing, amazing. But certainly seems to be around managing work-life balance, right? And figuring out how to actually achieve two things at the same time: travel and then build a business, or do a job at the same time.
Absolutely.
Um, and um, and so obviously, now you're on this big path with financial literacy, and certainly you're very motivated, and the vision is huge, and I'm very excited to dive into that in a bit. But as you reflect back on the years before you started Sensei, what was your most defining experience or defining
Yeah,
moment?
I think.
Maybe that was driving a truck, indeed, or
Yeah,
something else.
absolutely. So, if I have to go a little bit deeper, I mean, I love writing, and a lot of that we do at Sensei is actually using the written word and, of course, videos and other things in how to better engage with the end user and captivate him or her. And I, I think when I was 11, 12, I realized that I like to write. And my English class was one of my favorite classes. And I would look forward to that class. Um, and I think when I was 13 years old, I had my first article published in a national newspaper.
Oh,
And just a bit of a step back, for various reasons, um, I was bullied in my school, and I know a lot of people don't talk about bullying, but in retrospect, I know that I was being bullied. I was also the shortest and the um, smallest person in my school. So, but when my article came out in this national newspaper, and my principal in my school actually put it on the notice board, um, all of a sudden I realized people actually were the bullying stopped. People were respecting me, and I started writing more and more. So by the time I was in high school, I was a regular contributor to one of the national newspapers, writing on cricket mainly, which is one of my favorite sport. So I made up my mind fairly on that I wanted to become a journalist. Now, in India, when you're growing up, um, like many cultures, you either become a doctor or you become an engineer or you become a lawyer. Everything else doesn't really matter. So when I decided to become a journalist, it became a bit of a, um, flashpoint within my family. But I stuck to my guns, and eventually I also did my business degree. My parents hoped that I would probably get into business or do my chartered accountancy. Then my dad once said, listen, if you really want to be a writer, at least become a business journalist. And that's how my penchant towards business writing started. And I moved away from sports writing, and I was recruited by the Economic Times, which is the largest selling financial newspaper in India. And I joined them as a sub editor when I was barely 20 and a half, just out of college. And that's how my journey began.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Arindam. And sounds like you found in your talent and your passion early days a way to sort of get back and sort of establish your status in a school and sort of solve your more tactical problems. And that certainly, I think, speaks volumes about your character, because someone else, obviously, the challenges of bullying is that it pulls you down by the very
Oh,
definition,
totally.
makes you question
Yeah,
your self-worth, right? But you took that energy and
yeah,
used it for the greater good.
yeah.
So that's amazing. And so you've been, I think, was it 20 years, something like that you've been developing your craft from there on as a business journalist, as a financial journalist.
Yeah, and when I joined business journalism, it was an interesting time because India was a socialist economy for many years, since the time of its independence from British rule in 1947 until, I would say, the early 1990s. And when I joined business journalism, the Indian government was breaking away from the socialist regime and embracing free markets. So it was a fascinating time to become a business journalist because we talked about foreign companies coming in, people buying, doing IPOs, creating the whole equity culture in India. So people had to write about that. And after spending a fair bit of time on the desk where I was editing other people's stories, I also decided to write myself. And I remember um, getting a job as a reporter, which is a writing job, was very difficult in the Economic Times. So I told my bosses, hey, listen, why don't I write on the times that I'm not working? So I would actually edit for 8 9 hours a day, and then another 5 6 hours I would spend doing my own writing. So I would actually work almost 15 16 hours a day, every day, on Monday to Saturday. And I started building my portfolio of writing. I did some fascinating articles, and then over time, when there was a vacancy in the reporting team, I became a reporter. And I remember when my first news item came on the front page of the paper, that was a big thing, celebration. So once you write something on the front page, you almost become a celebrity. People talk to you, they will take your phone calls. And over time, I got recruited by Reuters, the international news agency in Bombay. And that's how I became an international journalist over time.
Amazing. And that those stories are fascinating, and how you work your way and to prove yourself and build your portfolio. I, I think one of the experiences that I am so curious to hear more about is your time with Mother Teresa.
Yeah,
There are very few people who can
yeah, it's actually interesting, and I didn't realize the importance of that experience. I think I was just out of school, but while as part of my school was very, um, my school had a relationship with the Missionaries of Charity, which was run by Mother Teresa, which was just less than a mile away from our school. So some of us would go and do as part of our social work project. But then eventually, after I finished my high school, I also lived close by, so I started working for her, and I was in the male ward and also helping some of the kids. And one thing that I learned very early on is the power of respecting money, because I came across people at the Missionaries of Charity who I knew that they did not start life um, as someone did not start life in poverty. They just fell off the wagon. It could have been mental health issues, addiction, uh, you know, various natural calamities may have spoiled their crop because they are farmers and they become homeless. So I think people normally experience dark times across over their life. I actually saw many people's dark faces in that short period of time, and it allowed me to understand that how important it is to respect money, not just earn money, but respect it. And years later, when I actually started talking about sensei and financial education, talking to parents, talking to teachers, one of the problems that parents still struggle is helping their kids to understand the value of respecting money. And even today, like when we create when we create a course or we create a piece of content for our platform, especially for kids, we ensure that that spirit is filtering through.
That's amazing. And have you, through your experiences, have you seen some transformative stories while you were serving those communities when they sort of changed their mindset and sort of went on to?
Yeah, people do. Like very recently, this was fascinating. We actually are working with a school in New York. It's part of the Brooklyn diocese, and this woman, she is the financial literacy educator in the school, and what she was telling us is that she has had numerous parents reaching out to her saying, "Hey, listen, we are very intrigued about the financial literacy that you're offering in the classrooms, because our kids are now coming home and they are asking us, do you have dad, do you have a budget? Are we saving? How much are we saving? How much are you putting into a 529?" So all of a sudden, when the whole family is talking money, which it should be, the barriers are broken down, and now you have a much better fostering between parents and children around money in a positive way at the dinner table. Imagine if, a 14 or 15-year-old actually asking about how we can balance between scholarships and financial aid and 529, and how we can prolong our limited resources, not only through the 4-year bachelor's degree, but also maybe another 2 years master's degree. That's the healthy conversation around the dining table. And that is what we are trying to achieve nationwide. One decision that we have taken proactively as a company is any school that has a meal plan, or any student who's on a meal plan, or whether it's discounted or free meal plan, we want to offer financial education to their parents for free as part of the package. So this is something that we probably are going to be the first people doing this in America. But I do know that financial education has to start with the living room. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
That's amazing, Arindam. And I have a confession to make as far as financial literacy is concerned. Um, Despite having a degree in finance for bachelor, and despite having been to Wharton and gotten my MBA, and generally being very savvy with company finance, I think it took me until recently to actually start being serious and respect personal finance.
Yeah.
And and really spend time analyzing it and understanding it and tracking it. And it's crazy if someone with these finance credentials sort of does that, right? I don't even have. Do you have an explanation for these people like myself?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I think people forget, and I'm let me. There's a small story that I should probably mention. Many years ago, one of my neighbors, she was a nurse, and she was fairly well paid, and she just as in a matter of fact way said, "Oh, I know that my 401, yeah, I think she had a 401k because she was working for a private company. I know it gets deducted, and but I don't know where it goes. I don't know." So I said, "Okay, why don't you just log in one day on a Saturday and let's walk through it." And when we logged in, I saw that most of her money was being deposited in one of those 0.1, 0.2% interest rate money market funds. And that has been going on for the previous 4 years. So I said, "Look, your money is not working for you." And I walked her through compound interest and how it works. And then we made some changes. We did not go crazy. I just took a sense of her risk tolerance, and we were able to balance it out among certain index funds. Um, and then she calls me 2 months later saying, "Hey, what have you done?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look, I have made more money on my portfolio in the last few weeks than I've ever done in the previous, 4 or 5 years." So she was excited, and then she asked me to actually help some of her colleagues as well. That's when I also realized the dearth of financial wellness in the workplace, in the education system, everywhere you go. It's almost taken for granted that you would know how to invest or how to allocate your funds. So those are some of the things that does bother me.
Absolutely. And so those are certainly fascinating examples, and I perhaps know more people like the nurse example than those that are different. And that there is certainly a huge opportunity. Looks like some of our listeners here need your help too. They're commenting. Fantastic. Well, so if we go back to the beginnings of Sensei. Um, Obviously, you've seen those challenges firsthand, and the lowest low that many of the families and community were experiencing. When did you have an aha moment, or what was happening in your life when you said, "Hey, this is it. This is my mission," or
Yeah,
how did it happen?
that's a good question. Actually, I was uh, this happened actually around '07, '08. I was writing a column for I used to work for Dow Jones Group, and Wall Street Journal was one of our publications. And I would write a column called "The Herd on the Street" for the Wall Street Journal that would get published on Dow Jones Newswires, and then also a deep, broader version would get published in Barron's magazine as under the European Trader. So I had to be thoughtful pretty much in every column that I wrote, which allowed me to dig deeper in what was really happening. And one of the things that I had to do as part of my job was go on television stations and explain to the world that if someone is defaulting on a mortgage in Nebraska in America, why can't someone in Ealing in London get a mortgage? So as I was explaining to them, I realized that, wait a minute, it is fashionable to blame Wall Street banks for what was going on, but why are so many people in America taking bad financial decisions systematically? And that's when I realized that in America, at least, if you're not being taught financial education in the classrooms, you pretty much are not getting taught financial education at all, because people in this country, for good or bad reasons, they're heavily dependent on what they learn in the classroom. and that's how their lives move forward. So, which means that generations of millennials and Generation Xers and the baby boomers out there are in the workforce without any financial education. So that's when I realized, wait a minute, I would like to do something. I just did not know how until years later, when I had the opportunity, when both me and my co-founder, we decided to actually figure out what actually will work, because nothing was working. A lot of people were doing a lot of things. A lot of people were doing a lot of stuff, free stuff, but people would slap a piece of content on their website and think it'll work. But that's not how magic happens. Magic happens when you actually work on engagement. And that's what at Sensei we are trying to do.
And so you knew the problem existed
Yeah.
from just your professional side.
Mhm.
And uh, if I recall correctly, you traveled all over the country interviewing 100 people or something to
Yeah,
that,
no, actually, it's probably over at least over 1,000 people we spoke.
over 1,000 people.
Yeah, because so we went to multiple conferences. We started talking to teachers, kids. One thing that we did was, uh, and this is something that I learned when in my previous companies, and I won't uh, name which one, but I worked for a well-known company that would launch a product first, and then they will figure out whether the market wants it. And lo and behold, the market would not want it or would want different things. So the entire product um, go to market would get prolonged for months. Now, it's all well and good if you have a lot of money, but what if you don't have a lot of money? So you have to ensure that before you spend the money, you ensure that people actually want it, or there is a pain point that people are facing, because a lot of people also don't know what they don't know, right? I mean, if you asked Henry Ford when he was launching his car, hey, have you asked your customers what they need? They'll probably get an answer, oh, we need a faster buggy
Of
or a
course.
faster horse, right? So what we did was we actually asked kids, and I remember going to University of Pennsylvania doing a workshop, and then one woman said, look, why can't finance be written like a story? Why can't you take people's use it? Why can't you do the storytelling approach? So that's something that we embraced over time. We got people to write for us if they had a problem that they dealt with. And so we started investing a lot of time in interviewing the writers. So we would get writers, and we would try to drill down on not what necessarily the writer knew, but whether the writer himself or herself went through a financial situation and how they dealt with it. So that became more popular among people who became our first time users. And we also were able to collect a lot of data on the behavior of content and its interaction. And now, where we are today is we are now able to add different types of content on top of the stories that we have, and combine that with technologies, and we are now able to license them to various institutions.
That's amazing. And so we talked a bit about business side, and we'll come back to it and sort of how the team is set up and
Yeah,
writers and users and whatnot. But I really wanted to spend some time talking about your journey as a human, as a founder. Certainly you worked in corporate setting for a long time. Sounds like you got into it because you were fighting against bullying. Would you say that you were fighting against something to get you to this madness of becoming a startup founder?
well,
What
look,
was your personal
yeah,
motivation?
no, it's a good question, and I um, look, as a founder, you're fighting every day, right? You're either fighting against people who are taking longer than they should in investing in you, despite making promises, or you're fighting against clients who want to prolong a sales cycle, or you're also fighting against, time as well, because when you are a startup, you may have the greatest idea and you may have a great product, but if you're not able to take it to the market, or if you're not able to meet certain milestones, then you shut down, or you do a distress sale, um, or you move on and do something else. Now, the problem that we as founders always have to deal with is balancing resources. And that is not easy to do, because sometimes when you are in an industry, you can't get the right talent, or you have the right talent, but you're not able to pay them as much as you want to, because they probably have another job somewhere and they're only willing to come on board if you match their salaries. So there are a lot of things that you're always battling with. But I will say, though, that it's incredibly important to keep an eye on the mission. During my phases as a startup, which is still very brief compared to many other company founders, we have been tempted to move away, or other people have tempted us to move away from financial education as a mission, and position ourselves as a marketing solution, or help people who are helping financially savvy people to just buy more products. That's something that we will not do. Our mission still remains financial education. And I do believe that if we are able to grow our company, we will not only be able to help people who are struggling with their finances, but we will also be able to help partners, which is credit unions and banks and many wealth managers and financial advisors, who are also committed to financial education, but they do not have the tools and the wherewithal to do that. And that's where those are the people that we want to work with every day.
Yeah, that certainly is true. And I think as a founder, you always get so many pieces of advice, often conflicting, right? And they're nothing more oftentimes than just people's own biases, right? And if
Yep.
someone succeeded with their marketing platform, they would say, well, this is the best thing under the sun, or
Yeah.
whatever else their experience is. And so just having that lens of staying true to what you really want to accomplish is certainly key, because that's what drives startup lives or dies by founder's passion, right? And if that's where your passion is, right, I kudos to you to sticking to your guns and a big vision you have. And in terms of just the sort of what startup journey is, right? As you said, right, you're sort of not early days, but not, it's been a few years of that journey, of this journey. Is it more difficult or than you thought it is? Is it different from what you thought it is? How?
Yeah, and it's a good question. So, yes, it has been a little bit more difficult than I thought, but that's also because we also had COVID in between. And many startups, they had to close down during COVID. We survived COVID, and we are in growth mode right now. But I will say that one of the things that we did is, and that's probably because um, of our journalistic background, is we are not scared to ask questions. So going to conferences, meeting people, that's in our DNA. So asking people who we believe have done it better, or some aspect they've done it better than I know, is, I think that, I mean, I get up in the morning telling myself I need to prove myself again today. And to me, every day is the first day of the rest of your life. So how I act and do and what I do today is going to determine my future starting today. So what does it mean? It basically means remaining open to people who know better than you. When I'm looking for people in my team, I always recruit people who are smarter than me in something, and I want to learn from them. So I always tell people, how would you do it? How would you handle this? And I do hope that the strategy of staying open, listening to people, listening to customers, I know that I will fail in certain areas, and we've done a lot of wrong things, but how quickly we can respond and make the pivots. And I think the biggest pivot that we made was from moving from B to C, business to consumer directly, to business directly. And I do know that many people who remained in business to consumer, they had to shut down their business. So those are some of the things that I continue to take on board from people. Um, we have examples, many examples of people who have made mistakes, but it's a matter of embracing those mistakes, acknowledging them, and moving on.
I absolutely love this, Arindam. And today is the first day of the rest of your life, right? And just knowing that whatever you do today or don't do will have an impact. And to the
Yeah.
extent that things are not going the way you want, today is the day to change it. Have you always had this mindset, or this is something just kind of came as part of the startup journey and sort of the twists and turns and sort of regulation system for you to
Well,
just
look,
stay course?
no, listen. I mean, I think if any founder, I think all founders at the early days of a startup, you are an underdog,
Right.
and you have to embrace that. If anyone wants to be arrogant and think that they know it all or they are the best, then I think that's the wrong approach. You are an underdog, at least for the first few years. I mean, I always remember the story about how in the search engine market, we had AOL, a couple of other players, but then 6, 7 years later, Google came up with a better technology and better user experience. And they focused on the user experience. And look where they are today. Um, Even if you look at Apple, for instance, I mean, so many companies have tried to do portable television, portable videos in the past, but they failed. But then Apple comes in and they have the iPad and they have they came up with the first Nano. I mean, they focused on the user experience. And in my opinion, financial education is a bit like that. Like when you are asking someone to engage with the body of knowledge outside the classroom, you have to make it engaging. And that is something that I'm learning every day, how better we can engage. So you have to talk to people, you have to challenge yourself. If you get up in the morning and if you think that people are consuming content in a different way, so let's find out. I mean, as we speak, we are testing, we're almost done beta testing something, how to use financial education content in an AI generative environment.
Mm.
And many people will still say that ChatGPT or AI is bad, which probably it is. I don't want to get into that debate, but we have an advantage of training the chat bot with our own content library. And so our chatbot eventually is going to be a very smart one, answering questions that have already been checked and validated. And we are not fighting AI as a content provider. Many content companies are still fighting AI, and I think that's the wrong move. We want to get ahead, get in front of that story, because we may fight it, but guess what the users are going to do? They're not going to fight it. They will use AI to find their solutions. So we might as well be that provider of providing quality education using AI so that they can actually at least not make mistakes.
Absolutely. Users will always find the path of least resistance,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh,
so, uh,
totally.
and especially when they don't know better, right? When they
Yes.
don't know what the absolute sort of better content is, or the
Yeah.
truth is about financial literacy.
Yes.
I absolutely love that, embracing innovation, and if you don't disrupt yourself, right, someone else will. So
Yes.
that certainly is true. And so talking about building the team, and you mentioned some of the aspects of hiring writers who personally experience some of the challenges and how they overcome it. Can you talk a little bit about sort of hiring? Do you hire for values? Do you hire for skills? Do you hire sort of, how do you build a team around yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think. I mean, first and foremost, we ensure that people understand what we do. We are a financial education company. We are a mission-driven company that happens to be not a nonprofit. And if you don't believe in a financial education, it'll be hard for us for you to fit in. And we've had some hires in the past that kind of didn't really understand what we do. And the good news about our platform is that people understand what our mission is. We are now more visible on social media and various platforms. But also, one thing that is working in our favor, and hopefully we can capitalize on that, is financial education is now talked about on various public forum by who people who are respected. I'll give you an example. So, in the UK, for instance, the Prime Minister in the UK, he is very worried about the lack of economics education in British schools. He's already starting to talk in England about the value of financial education. In the US, you have even some you have at least a dozen NFL football players who are acting as influencers for financial education. Vanessa Williams herself is actually a big proponent of financial literacy. So people are now becoming much more aware of the value of financial literacy. So when we are recruiting people, we only want to recruit people or engage with people who understand what we are trying to do. And if you don't understand the mission, it's very hard. But that said, a company like ours, and again, we are still small, but as we grow, whether it is if you are a full stack developer, or you're a writer, or you're somebody involved in customer success, understanding the financial pain points of a normal human being, understanding the inability of many people not to understand finances, that awareness should be key and is very critical in what we do.
Amazing. um, that that is so important, because you can oftentimes teach many other things, or allow a person to self-develop as part of that job or journey in the company, but really embracing the vision, it's absolutely the number one aspect here. We've certainly had numerous examples in class tag, in my own experience, when you hire someone who has a different vision, and so they sort of embrace it on the surface, but then they start growing in a different direction, and
Yeah,
it just is counterproductive
yeah.
for especially in a startup, when it's all about stacking those wins, right? And if the stack moves in a different direction, then the whole house kind of falls
Oh,
apart.
totally.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, where I wanted to finish off, Arindam, it's been amazing, and there are many more stories I would love to talk about. But if you were starting over again today, a tech startup company, um, what would your advice be, or what would you do differently or the same as you've done, sort of what are
Yeah,
you convince them?
yeah. And I think I would certainly try to avoid the mistakes that I've made. And the list is long in the sense that you make a ton of mistakes when you are founding a company. But I think one thing that I would be very, very careful about this time around is um, not take people at the face value. Uh, it's actually amazing, and I will never, at least for now, I will never name and shame anybody. But in the last few years, people would come out of the woodwork, and I can do this for you, I can do that for you. These are my skills, and they would act as an advisor, or they would try to act as an advisor. And the reality is that after a few weeks, you realize they actually don't understand what you're trying to do. Or they would say, if you do this, then I think it'll be good for you. Like I will never forget one gentleman actually saying that, why don't you identify what technology you want to use, and why don't you acquire this company, and maybe if you put it in your prospectus, you'll be able to raise a lot of money because you're acquiring a technology company. So again, you you hear a variety of things from a variety of people. Some of them you just say no, some of them you say yes, and then some of them you say half yes, let's see. And that's when you have to use your judgment call. One thing that I do always is I talk to people. So I have a very good set of advisors now who are advising me, and I very seldom take a decision on my own. I always run it by my advisors, my colleagues. I think the youngest colleague in my team, I think she's 28 or 29 years old. And I always ask her questions that, hey, how would you do this in a different way? I mean, there is always people. I remember when we were testing the engagement of our content, I hired a 17-year-old because I thought, and rightfully so, is that if he does not understand what we're doing, what we're writing, which means we're doing something wrong. So I told him, look, every time you do not understand an article, can you highlight the paragraphs to me and send it to me? Don't go to the writer directly, just send it to me. And it worked because when I sent it back to the writer with some instructions, when it came back, it was a much better, engaging copy. So if I have to start all over again, I would probably be more careful about people that I bring on board. That is the most important thing. I would rather keep a vacancy for a few weeks till I get the right person, but not hire in haste. That's one thing that I would probably do. The second thing is, of course, getting the technology right. That's important. Technology plays a critical role in the content business, and I think many content companies, they die because they haven't been able to combine the newest technologies with their existing model. And we do not want to be that company. We can't afford to. So
Wonderful. I was just really reflecting on what you said about trusting people and taking the words from various advisors and others, sort of well-meaning people at face value. And I think for me, it's always been a conflict between the crazy optimism that every founder needs to have beyond all odds to start the business and believe in, no matter if all, we're losing all sales, I see that win, it's right there, right? Just having that crazy belief that it's
yeah,
going to happen, especially in the early days, but at the same time actually not believing what people say, right? So I think that is, that strikes me as a very common sort of separation that you need to make between believing in the fact that things will work out for you
yeah,
and the company, but at the same time not believing in what people say, which maybe not intended, but
yeah,
at the end of the day they don't have stakes in the
yeah,
ground, with the company and success, and
yeah.
so until they do. Thank you, Arindam. It was amazing conversation. I wish
Thank
you
you.
and Sensei great future, not only because we're optimists, but because your mission is so powerful and you're so passionate
Thank you
about
so much.
pursuing it. And look forward to following your journey. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.